Hello and welcome to Inside Judicial Watch. I'm your host, Bruce Schlussman. With me today we have Judicial Watch President Tom Fitton here to discuss the Mueller report, which was recently released. Thanks so much for coming by, Tom.
Hey, Bruce.
So the Mueller report obviously was released, and we saw all the circus in the media and just the uproar from Democrats in the House and everyone kind of saying what's in it and kind of picking and choosing little bits and pieces. Do you want to tell us a little bit about that report and kind of the corresponding aftermath?
Well, I've read the report, and let me just start off that Attorney General Barr performed a significant public service when he received the report. He saw what the Mueller special counsel team was up to. They had created this massive report, in many ways designed to distract from the truth that there was no collusion and that they couldn't make an obstruction case. So my guess is they were thinking they were going to get that massive report out into the public domain and distract from those truths. And Mueller and Barr saw through that, and he immediately announced no collusion. Oh, and you think you're going to smear the president on obstruction? I find no obstruction here as a matter of law and fact. So for 10 days we had that massive educational effort by Barr telling the American people no collusion. So the report shows there was no collusion, and it shows why there shouldn't have been a Mueller report, because it's 448 pages of really gossip and innuendo designed to make the president look bad. The first part of the report is about collusion, and there is no collusion. They describe in great, minute detail really uninteresting and unimportant and unsubstantial communications between the Russians and Trump associates or Trump world people that don't amount to a hill of beans. But on the core issue, was there collusion between Trump and the Russians to interfere in our election? They found no evidence. And that could have been said in a page or two, but instead they took 200 pages, which is to imply that there's smoke despite them knowing, I think, for a long time there's no fire. Now, part two is the so-called obstruction part. And there Mueller smeared the president by suggesting he may have obstructed justice because they couldn't exonerate him. Well, there's no evidence he obstructed justice. There's evidence he complained, rightly so, about Jeff Sessions. There's evidence he complained about the abuses of the Mueller investigation. And Mueller suggests that the president, exercising his constitutional authority to hire and fire personnel and manage the Justice Department and the FBI, could constitute obstruction of justice. So, the deep state DOJ, the anti-Trumpers in the Mueller operation thinks that the president being president could constitute a crime, which of course is absurd.
So, to backing up a little bit about didn't refuse to exonerate him, what does that mean if if there was no obstruction of justice and they couldn't find any evidence of that? What does they can't exonerate him mean?
This is why I think there shouldn't have been a report. I knew that was going to be the game they would play. If they couldn't prove the case, they would make the allegation while pretending not to make the allegation. The idea that a Justice Department employee would say we can't exonerate the president from having committed a crime, to me, is the ultimate abuse of authority and abuse of power. In many ways, this entire report was the Mueller special counsel's last abuse of power, because there's been abuses of power by Mueller throughout. And and that goes to show that point goes to the kind of the what's not in there part of the discussion. There's no discussion about the controversy around his appointment, the reason that President Trump might have been concerned about what Mueller was up to, the fraudulent dossier. There's virtually no reference to the dossier other than to say it's not verified, which is confirmation the dossier is false. This is really something the Justice Department should never have gotten themselves into, but it's what happened under the abuses of the Obama administration, and Rod Rosenstein, to his eternal discredit, got this abusive investigation going.
So we're talking about at some points in your interview, you've talked about how there was no collusion, and you believe that they knew there was no collusion. At what point do you think they kind of figured it out and the investigation just kept dragging on?
Well, you can go back, and in February of 2018, Rod Rosenstein held a press conference, and he was announcing one of the major Mueller indictments of the Russians allegedly trying to interfere in our election campaign, either with ads or through hacks. I forget which one. But he said no American knowingly was involved in this issue, in working with the Russians. So you had Rod Rosenstein in February 2018 say, no Americans were knowingly involved with the Russians in their efforts to interfere in our elections. You had the Attorney General of the United States say the same thing after reviewing the Mueller report. And certainly that's the Mueller report's conclusion. So they've known from the get-go for at least a year. And of course you've got these infamous text messages between Peter Strzok and Lisa Page showing where they're discussing, even before Mueller begins, there's no there. They've always known there's no collusion. The dossier was, I think, a knowingly false document, and even the most charitable interpretation of the dossier, it was a rather obvious effort by the Russia intelligence agencies to launder false, fake information designed to make Donald Trump look bad into our political discussions during the campaign. So who worked with them to do that? Hillary Clinton's vendors, Christopher Steele, Fusion GPS. They shopped that through the FBI and DOJ and the Obama administration, rather than saying, oh, well, look, the Russians are trying to gain leverage over the president using false and fake information. No, they used it as a pretext to spy on him. That's the scandal that Mueller refused to confront. The report, despite it making President Trump look good in terms of the collusion, it's really fundamentally dishonest in terms of the failure to deal with the corruption behind the whole Russia hoax.
So I'm glad you brought up the Steele dossier and Fusion GPS and all of that. At what point, how involved was that information that the Mueller report and Mueller's investigation obviously had access to that information? How involved was that information and kind of the whole reason this investigation happened?
Well, I think, the way I read your question is, was Mueller aware of all this?
Yes.
Remember, that shady dossier was used to obtain a FISA warrant targeting Trump during Mueller's special counsel investigation. So those FISA warrants weren't all pre-Mueller. At least one of them was after he was appointed. And it's pretty clear he was investigating the dossier because he was trying to investigate some of the stories that were shopped through the dossier. And of course he found them all wanting, but he never admitted that this was another dossier story that we shot down. As I say, to the degree he mentions the dossier specifically, he says it's unverified. So it's now 3 years after that dossier was manufactured and concocted by the Clinton DNC gang, and they still are telling us it's unverified. But of course we knew that back in January of 2017 because James Comey admitted it was unverified the day he showed it to then President-elect Trump, in a day that will go down kind of in history because President Trump, or then President-elect Trump, was horrified that the FBI was walking around with this document that was obviously fake, trying to make him look bad.
So we mentioned investigating the investigators. That's something you've talked about quite a bit in reaction to this Mueller report, and it's something Judicial Watch has been doing for quite some time. But what about the federal government? At what point, what do we need from them to get an investigation of the investigators?
Well, they need to follow our lead. I mean, that would be in the least. I mean, we've been investigating the FISA warrants. We exposed how Christopher Steele, the Clinton spy, was also paid by the Obama FBI. We exposed the dozens of contacts that the Justice Department had with Christopher Steele in 2017. We exposed the fact that the number 2 deputy of Mueller, Andrew Weissman, was an anti-Trumper. We exposed an email he sent to Sally Yates, the other anti-Trump official of the Obama administration, praising her for obstructing the president's travel ban. We're asking questions about the leaks. We're suing for the leaks between of classified information showing, for instance, communications between General Flynn and the Russian ambassador. That stuff was leaked illegally, all designed to get Flynn and make Trump look bad. So we're in court on virtually every aspect of the deep state conspiracy, the coup against President Trump, and we're being obstructed by the Justice Department. So the first thing that Attorney General Barr can do is tell his guys, stop obstructing Judicial Watch's lawsuits, release the records. And of course, the president should direct the declassification of other records that the deep state is hiding behind. They pretend everything is classified in a way that if it was unclassified, it would harm our national security. Mm-hmm. No, it would just harm their job prospects and maybe their potential freedom, because people might go to jail if people knew the full truth of what's going on here. So there's got to be this full court press on transparency. And then, of course, the Justice Department needs to do its job in the sense of doing a serious criminal investigation of the misconduct here. The president is a crime victim. They used and abused the powers entrusted to them by the American people to spy on him improperly and target him illegally. And so there needs to be some justice there. And I just hope Attorney General Barr continues his high batting average and doing the right thing by going full bore investigating these abuses targeting President Trump and other innocents.
You've mentioned how kind of declassifying a lot of these documents might help clear the air and transparency, correct?
Yes.
Yeah.
And that's something the president's shown willingness to do. He's previously declassified other documents, the FISA warrant applications that Judicial Watch obtained from as a result of a lawsuit. We wouldn't have gotten those if the president hadn't declassified some underlying material. And that led to the first release of FISA warrant applications in American history. And they showed the corruption of the FISA process. And now there's even more material in those FISA warrants that, according to those who have seen them, would show even additional corruption. So he's got to get all that material out there. And there are other documents. But then, there's kind of the petty anti-corruption in terms of cover-up by the FBI. We've just been told, for instance, that we can't get text messages from the FBI, more or less. They don't want to search for text messages. So the text messages of Andrew McCabe, Lisa Page, Peter Strzok, maybe even James Comey, we can't get access to, practically speaking, because the FBI has decided they're above the law and that they shouldn't have to search text messages in response to the Freedom of Information Act. That's a kind of a policy change that immediately can disgorge a lot of information that's now being sat on by the corrupted FBI. Because at the leadership level, the FBI is still corrupted because they're still in cover-up mode, and they've shown even under Mr. Wray, the Trump appointee, he's more interested in protecting the reputation of the FBI than cleaning house at that agency.
So going back to the Mueller report about the Democrats and all these investigations going on and the demand for Trump documents, what happens with that?
Well, I don't know what the Democrats are going to do because they don't know what they're going to do. They seem to be fighting internally as to whether to proceed with impeachment or not. But we should understand that the Mueller report was part of this coup effort against President Trump. It began during the Obama administration with this insurance policy approach to misusing our intelligence apparatus to target a political opponent. Then you had Rod Rosenstein talking about trying to remove the president because he fired someone that he liked, Mr. Comey. And out of that coup discussion flowed the appointment of Mueller. So the Mueller phase of the coup is over, and now it will continue in the House controlled by the Democrats. And impeachment or not, the harassment and the effort to remove the president before his time, meaning the election, will continue. With impeachment or not, they've got all these harassing subpoenas of his personal, private and confidential business records, his accounting records. They're trying to abuse the IRS to get access to his confidential tax returns. really something unprecedented in American history in terms of illicit targeting of the president's personal tax returns. And that ought to be concerning to all Americans, because if they can come after the president to try to get his tax returns for political reasons, they can come after all of us. And so the president obviously is taking a hard line. May not be obvious because people may not be following it, but he's taking a hard line. He's going to resist some of these inquiries. He's sued in court to prevent, for instance, his accountants from having to answer a abusive subpoena by the House Democrats. He's suggesting they hold cert executive privilege over some of his aides testifying to Congress, and that will lead to a court fight. But that executive privilege is something that the courts have upheld in the past, so he may have an opportunity there. You know, I would recommend, when there's a legitimate inquiry, he should be transparent and cooperate with Congress. Where there's illegitimate inquiries and abusive inquiries, he should stand fast and either say no or protect himself by going to court. But he shouldn't roll over, that's for sure. And I've been thinking through this a little bit. You know, Congress has the ability to provide oversight because of its legislative function. They create legislation and they need information, right? And that's kind of the reasoning behind Congress asking executive branch agencies for testimony and third parties, private individuals for testimony. But you know, the president has abilities under the Constitution to provide recommendations to Congress. Well, does that provide him with the ability to conduct oversight? Maybe. And so if I were him, I would think about pushing back on Congress and saying, I want some documents about how you're operating, because I want to figure out what reforms I need to undertake as president or recommend to you to undertake. So what's good for the goose ought to be good for the gander. And many people don't understand this, but for instance, the Freedom of Information Act, which Judicial Watch uses, to such great effect, only applies to the executive branch. It doesn't apply to Congress. And so one of the reforms I think the president should talk about, and frankly, Democrats and Republicans might agree on this, is why doesn't the Freedom of Information Act apply to Congress? They want to know what the president was up to? Fair game, maybe. I want to know what Congress has been up to.
So I don't want to speculate too much, but do you think this has anything to do with 2020 around the corner? Are you allowed to answer that question?
Oh, yeah. Well, you know, it's politics. You know, and Republicans engage in political oversight, too. But it's up to groups like Judicial Watch to try to tell people how to think about things and recognize when there are, the political nature of the oversight, while pushing generally for transparency and accountability. You know, I really think the corruption scandal here is the targeting of the president. Mm-hmm. And the Democrats, by harassing him personally, are trying to distract from their party's involvement in that criminal conspiracy against him, that coup effort. Because remember, this is a Democratic National Committee effort in terms of pushing the dossier through the DOJ and the FBI. And ironically, it's always about Hillary Clinton in many ways. Because remember, Hillary Clinton was behind the dossier, and she escaped prosecution, while at the same time, while the Justice Department is giving her the benefit of the doubt and bending over backwards for her, they're literally working with her people, to target then candidate Trump. And so Hillary Clinton's dossier has been found wanting by the Mueller operation. And you know, we just found documents about Hillary Clinton's emails being found in, well, the FBI actually wasn't found documents. The FBI confirmed to us in discovery we have into the Clinton email issue, they swore under oath in written questions that they found Clinton emails in Obama's White House. Well, if you want to know what this coup is about, that's what the coup is about. It's about protecting Hillary Clinton, Obama, and the rest from the consequences of their cover-up and misconduct during their administration. What better way to cover that up than to distract with an illegal, illicit effort to go after the guy who removed them from power?
So where does Judicial Watch go from here?
We're going to keep on doing the heavy lifting. We've got the 40-plus lawsuits into this deep state conspiracy against, it's not against Donald Trump. Obviously, personally, he's the victim here, but it's against us. It's against the presidency, it's against our republic, it's against our constitutional form of government. Do we want unelected bureaucrats and corrupt politicians to overturn elections and to try to remove our elected officials from office improperly? Do we want to be run by the politicians we put in office, or unelected corrupt bureaucrats, deep staters who think they know better than the voters? So if you value your vote and you value our constitutional republic, then you're going to want to support this effort to uncover this massive corruption scandal that has President Trump as its target, but it's the republic that's at stake.
Well, thank you so much for coming by and filling us in on the Mueller report and everything that's going on, and bringing up Clinton too, and kind of how this all pertains to the investigations and the depositions we're doing with Hillary Clinton.
Yeah, it's important to remember, Bruce, that the Russia hoax was never really about President Trump. I exaggerate slightly there. It was about protecting Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama from being held accountable for the corruption that they didn't want people to know about or pursue.
Well, thank you so much for filling us in on all of this.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us on Inside Judicial Watch. Please be sure to visit our website and subscribe to us on YouTube, like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter and Instagram, and please be sure to donate if you support our work, and check out other episodes of Inside Judicial Watch and Inside Report. Thank you so much for joining us.